I'm breathing underwater, I'm weightless through space. I'm soaring like an eagle all over this place. Creatures most will never see are waiting there to look at me, and all I gotta do is breathe underwater.
Yeah, as it so often happens, somebody's in a mood. She'll come up when she's good and ready, if she gets good and ready. Admiral Nelson is on a commercial flight from hither to yon. One of the less pleasant things about flying commercial is often the guy next to you. That's why my wife and I always get seats together. That way we know what kind of annoyance to expect.
Is your first trip to Washington? Ah, but of course not. You must make this trip so many times you feel like a commuter.
Sometimes it does feel like that.
One thing that tells us we're watching a scene from the long distant past is this.
Here we are.
Thank you.
No thanks.
Sorry, sir. It's right there in my stewardess's manual. I'm not allowed to take no for an answer.
Even if I'm not hungry?
Especially if you're not hungry.
Oh, and I just had coffee.
That's right. Once upon a time, airlines served genuine food to every passenger on most every flight. Then somebody discovered that stuff actually costs American dollars, and they all discontinued the practice.
We are starting our descent.
That's who we are.
As I said, on some flights, the worst part of the whole thing is the guy next to you, especially when he drugs you and then does this.
If everyone remains quietly in their seats, no one will get hurt. This is not a robbery.
That's very foolish. Sit down.
Should anyone feel brave, I would suggest that you glance to the rear. And I would suggest also that you put on your seat belts.
No, they're not hijacking the plane. They're hijacking Admiral Nelson. I don't want to try and count the things wrong with that. First, I really want to know what brand of plane has a closet door instead of a pressure door so I can fly something else. More important, it's impossible to open the door on a commercial flight and always has been, not because of safety features, but because of physics. The differential air pressure between the outside and the inside of the plane means that door isn't moving for anything. I'm sure you could blow it open or something, and then not only does the whole plane crash, but you probably get sucked out and hit your head on something so you're not conscious to open your chute. This could not happen. It is not physically possible. Everything else that happens is based on this stunt working, which it cannot do. So with that in mind, I'm more than a little tempted to end the review right here and just write off the rest of this as one of those guys' fantasies as he hurtles toward the ground with a chute that didn't open. Really, it lost me right here. But the fact is, the rest of it is equally improbable, so we may as well see how out there they get. Speaking of out there, Nelson wakes up to this.
Dass dieses Volk eins nicht verweichlicht wird, sondern dass es hart sein kann. Und ihr müsst euch in der Jugend dafür stehlen. Ihr müsst lernen, Entbehrungen auf euch zu nehmen.
Nelson recognizes this guy. The guy in the chair, I mean. Sadly, most everybody recognizes the guy in the film.
Schroeder. Colonel Alfred Schroeder.
Standartenführer Alfred Schroeder. Even on this forgotten edge of nowhere, we must try to observe the amenities.
You really are Alfred Schroeder.
He was a Nazi war criminal who was with Mustache Guy in the bunker during the final days. The Fuhrer helped him get out and tasked him with resurrecting the whole thing and building a glorious Fourth Reich. His real name was Jacques Theodore van Drelen Gimberg, which he later shortened to John Van Drelen. He frequently played Nazis, and he had a good reason to. Like a lot of the guys from Hogan's Heroes, it was his gigantic skew to them. He was born in the Netherlands, and when the Nazis invaded, they threw him into a labor camp. He managed to steal a German officer's uniform and walk right out the front gate. Needless to say, he wasn't about to hang around the Netherlands, so he slipped out and made his way to the United States. He played Captain Von Trapp, an appropriate role considering his own story, in the first U.S. tour of The Sound of Music. He was Richard Rodgers' first choice to play the captain in the movie. He went on to have a successful career both in TV and movies. Watching him here, it's easy to see why.
The airplane.
Then you must also remember one of your fellow passengers, Lieutenant Dana.
Now that he is conscious, shall I put him in with the others?
No, Carl. Admiral Nelson is one of my special guests. I will escort him personally.
Schroeder likes to repeat himself, especially to tell Nelson there's no possible escape. Armed guards are everywhere. And they appear to be holding 40s era MP-40 submachine guns. 30 years after the war, they haven't upgraded. My first question, where'd they get them? None were made after 1945, and the vast majority of them were captured. Those either went home with soldiers as souvenirs or got sold to various countries that were fighting for independence. The latest use that I could find was some of them found their way into the hands of some soldiers from the North during the Vietnam War. So, unless they're building them themselves, I don't want to know how hard he had to scrounge to find that many. I don't want to know why he scrounged so hard to find that many when the American M16A1 was in full production and easy to procure. But it doesn't look Nazi-ish. I bet that's the reason. It looks too much like freedom. Schroeder has hinted that they're on a remote island somewhere. His first order of business was to build a prison camp. I'd think a few well-ventilated latrines would be a little more important, but I've never been a Nazi, so maybe there's something I don't understand.
I have survived attacking armies, the collapse of my panzer divisions, the bombings of Berlin, the shelling and burning of our bunker.
And a 30-year manhunt by the free world.
Yes, and that too. I've been hunted like an animal.
You know the solution to that? Don't act like an animal. Guys like him never figure that out.
I've hidden in the sewers of the world like a criminal. And through it all, I survived.
Yeah, rats often survive in sewers. The problem right now is you came out of the sewer.
Yes. You people always seem to survive.
You won the war and you think you are heroes. You call yourself free, just men, while you label us war criminals.
Well, the whole world labeled you war criminals.
All that is ancient history now. All our concern is here and now.
Ooh, Admiral Nelson hit a nerve. One guy or a handful of politicians he can shrug off. The whole world, not so much. And now Nelson knows one of this guy's weaknesses.
Gentlemen, please meet Admiral Nelson. Admiral, may I present Dr. Gustav Reinhardt.
Gustav Reinhardt? You're supposed to be dead.
I am. We all are.
He's gathered a veritable plethora of scientists and faked all their deaths so nobody would miss them. In Reinhardt's case, he crashed an entire passenger jet and murdered who knows how many people. But none of that matters. They were just little people after all.
And here we have Anton Miklos, my own private nuclear scientist.
I attended your Oxford lectures on new methods of exploding the neutron.
That was long ago, before I disappeared, never to be seen again.
Don't despair. When I am ready, the world will again hear a great deal about you. And this is Benjamin Brewster.
I know Mr. Brewster's work. Probably the world's top authority on electronics until
until his untimely death in that nasty skiing accident.
He doesn't care who really died in the accident because, again, little people. It's not as though everybody matters. The guy was probably genetically inferior anyway. The last guy in the room is Thomas. He's a 3-time decathlon champion and has been described as the world's greatest athlete. We'll learn that he's here as breeding stock. His job will be to produce genetically superior babies. Who the mother is, or if there's more than one, we won't get to find out. Spoiler? Neither will he. It's not that kind of show. Schroeder's plan calls for Brewster to handle communications and power in the New Order, Miklos to handle energy production, Nelson to manage the world's oceans, Thomas to provide the new master race, and Reinhardt to shape their minds. I don't get how he intends to do this, because unless his little island has an army of several million soldiers, taking on the whole world seems a little dumb. But dumb or not, they can't let him try. Using some light bulbs, a bit of wire, and Brewster's ingenuity, they've built a small shortwave radio with a makeshift telegraph key. Time to start transmitting.
Captain Crane.
Crane here.
Captain, I think I'm picking something up.
The Admiral has been gone for several weeks. The Seaview has been searching for him the whole time.
It's a CW signal that sounds like our code.
Put it on the amplifier.
It's Admiral Nelson.
The message includes his approximate location. Their charts will take care of the rest.
Spark, send a reply, just in case he's got to receive it too. Message received, loud and clear. The cavalry is on its way.
He shouldn't ought to done that.
The Seaview has received Nelson's message. They are coming full speed to the rescue.
Ausgezeichnet.
He can't help himself. He has to rub the Admiral's nose in it.
Admiral Nelson. First, let me compliment you on being so resourceful. I had allowed you 3 days to build your shortwave radio, and you did it in 1 single day, which puts us more than 2 days ahead of schedule. You see, Carl, never underestimate scientific ingenuity.
He shows Nelson the Seaview's answer and says, "You did exactly what I wanted you to do." He was never after Nelson. He wanted the sub and its very special armament.
After we capture the vessel, we will place our own crew aboard, and we will sail to here. Don't you notice anything of particular interest about the spot I'm pointing to?
Yeah, you're leaving smudges all over it. Next time, use an actual pointer, not your walking stick.
Seems equidistant to Washington or Moscow.
And with both cities well within the range of the nuclear missiles carried aboard the Seaview. Now tell me, Admiral, what do you think would happen after we fire 2 missiles simultaneously? One at Washington, and one at Moscow.
He says after the superpowers have destroyed each other, we will rise from the ashes and build a new world in our image. I assume that means they'll be green, glow in the dark, and eat rocks because radiation will have destroyed almost everything else, and that much fallout will probably blanket the whole planet and render it unlivable. You have fun with that.
I believe you have a shortwave radio hidden in his hut. Now, gentlemen, you know that it's contrary to all camp rules.
Give it to them. They know all about it anyway.
It's too bad they didn't make a fake one they could give to Diner, but nobody thought that far ahead. The first thing they have to do is figure out where the Seaview will be coming from and how Schroeder intends to trap it.
You once said the Prussian mind is almost entirely predictable. Now, is there any way of figuring out what Schroeder might be thinking? What he expects us to do next?
Very interesting. Then, while he's 1 step behind planning on a counter move, we could be executing a counter move.
Something like that.
With his knowledge of the radio destroying all our hopes for rescue, he'd then expect us to fight amongst ourselves?
Yes, well, we've done that, haven't we?
If you don't recognize Herr Zeller, the turncoat Austrian in The Sound of Music, you're forgiven. Ben Wright appeared in so many things it's understandable if one has trouble keeping them straight. We've seen him before in The Time Tunnel and Captain Nice, and he'll appear multiple times in Hogan's Heroes. If you want to see what's happening with that show, you can become a patron today and join us in Hogenheim. For those who don't know, I had gotten through 3 seasons of that show right here, and then suddenly the owners of the show, a network whose name ends in a 2-letter abbreviation that also describes their attitude, threatened to sue me if I didn't take it all down. In the course of trying to do that, the whole mess was lost. So I've started over again on Patreon because they don't kowtow to anybody. There's a link below that can get you started. Anyway, today Mr. Wright is one of the good guys. He's also extremely uncertain about this plan of Nelson's. What will Schroeder expect next?
He'd expect us to completely change direction. Do something bold and daring, utterly foolhardy. Something foolish like storming the main gate, something like that.
Well, then we'll have to do it. We don't want to disappoint him. And while some of us are diverting attention with that, the rest of us will be executing our real plan.
Yes, if there is a real plan.
There will be, as soon as we know exactly where and when he intends to spring his trap on the Seaview.
By putting their heads together and comparing little things they've seen over the past few months, they sort it out. There's a channel on the south side of the island, and Schroeder just had it dredged. There was no reason to. Their supplies and such come in by way of a bay at the other end of the island. One of the others was unloading boxes when he noticed some huge metal nets. Those are known as submarine nets, and they've been around for as long as submarines have. The idea is that the sub gets tangled in the net, and its trim planes, rudder, maybe even its propeller are rendered useless, and all the crew can do is sit there and wait to be captured or depth charged. The controls for the nets are in his headquarters building nearby.
Well, then all we have to do is find out what that wiring sets in motion. We'll have to send someone out there to take a look.
It's impossible. The guards would shoot any prisoner outside the walls on sight.
The last time someone went past the fence, Schroeder had him tortured for 4 days as a lesson to the rest of us. And then when Schroeder got tired of his role as teacher, he had him killed.
I'll go. There's a place behind the next hut where I can get under the fence. I checked it out. It's a blind spot. The tower guards can't see it.
He's also in the best shape to do something like that. It's settled he'll go tonight. Good thing he's keeping a low profile. He reaches the spot and slips under the fence.
Ausgezeichnet. Good. Very good. It's easy to see now how you won all those marvelous Olympic medals. Oh, don't worry. After we've carried out our plans, we will again hold the Olympic Games. And you may command them for the Fourth Reich.
Thanks, I'll like that. Listen, about the...
The guard. Yes. It's unfortunate, but necessary.
He's a mole. He tells Schroeder all their plans, then slips back to their hut.
Controls of the key. We've got to knock them out of action before he can close those submarine nets over the Seaview.
Nelson, I think it's impossible. We can't just walk out there and tear apart the headquarters building with our bare hands.
We're not going to tear it apart. We're going to blow it apart.
Some dried mud to create a solid sphere, an old tin can here and there, plus some basic household chemicals, and they have a hand grenade for each of them. He returns to the hut and reports that Schroeder is nowhere to be found and all the lights are out in his place. It's showtime.
I'd guess that the Seaview will move in just as dawn breaks.
Then we'll have to act right now.
That's right. Have we ever got a bomb? No. Okay, one last check after all going into battle.
If you didn't catch what Nelson did there, it'll become clear in just a moment. He and Thomas will go for the HQ building while the others create a diversion at the gate.
There. That's a spot the tower guards can't cover.
Good. We'll wait for the diversionary fireworks. Should be any second now.
I'm afraid you're mistaken once again, Admiral.
Or not. He always seems to be one step ahead of them. I wonder how.
At this moment, your very clever companions are being rounded up in the compound.
Quick, over the fence.
May I, please? Thank you. I must compliment you once more on your ingenuity. What a very nice little bomb. Too bad it will not explode.
Because a traitor sabotaged it.
As I mentioned before, Ben Wright played a collaborator in The Sound of Music, which appeared at pretty much the same time as this episode. Was that to make us think he was the informer? I don't know, it could just be coincidence. You knew there had to be one, and my money was always on Thomas. Schroeder explains why.
Don't be too harsh on Thomas. He is not as intellectually secure as you and the others, therefore he could not withstand one of my persuasions.
Thomas, do you realize he just said you're too stupid to see through Nazi propaganda? If I was the world's greatest athlete, I don't think I'd just stand there and take that. Since his cover is blown, he'll join the other goose steppers in the headquarters building. The Seaview is just entering the channel, and it's time to spring the trap.
Now. Now.
That's not the trap he was expecting. Too bad he'll never know what happened, but you can't have everything. If you were watching closely, you saw Nelson switch bombs with Thomas while he was doing his final check. That means Thomas had the one he had been working on outside. Now we know what he was doing. He restored the explosive that Thomas removed and used his watch to make a timer. Then he gave Thomas the live time bomb and let himself get caught. From there, the game was already over. The guys inside just didn't know it yet.
But how could you have figured Tomas? I checked every foot of that barbed wire fence, and there wasn't an inch of it that wasn't covered by one of the guard towers. There's only one way that Tomas could have gotten over that fence.
If Schroeder wanted him to.
Schroeder said Thomas wasn't an intellectual giant, and Thomas confirmed it. It didn't occur to him that Nelson, being a trained military man, might have scouted the fence himself when he arrived. The other guys didn't think of it because they're desk jockeys, university types. Nelson, on the other hand, has blown people up before. Thomas and the others discovered that if you try to take a sub, he's not above doing it again.
I'm breathing underwater, I'm weightless through space. I'm soaring like an eagle all over this place. Creatures most will never see are waiting there to look at me, and all I gotta do is breathe underwater.
That's my... That's my... And now Nelson won't... But none of that. God, don't bite yourself, stupid.